Hey Svitlana,
Hello, Arne.
what are we doing chess-wise today?
Today I'd like to show you the Catalan opening. So I usually show some more offbeat openings, but this time I wanted to teach something more classic and solid.
I'm super happy about this. I heard a lot about the Catalan, especially from my three cats.
Mhm.
So yeah, looking forward to get to know this opening.
So it starts with d4, and the whole idea of it is it's very similar to the Queen's Gambit, but except it's with this bishop coming to the long diagonal. So
Okay.
that's uh, that's how it would start. So of course, there's a lot of replies from Black that they could do, but the Catalan would fall under the umbrella of the Catalan if Black develops in the way of the regular Queen's Gambit, like
Gotcha.
this.
Yeah.
So everything else, for example, the King's Indian or the, I don't know, the Benoni, it wouldn't really be called the Catalan at that point, but you can still play some G3 systems against it. But that's just not something that I'll show today. Today I'll show the more, just the classic Catalan lines, or else we would take 10 hours.
Well, I think there would be some people who wouldn't mind anything about that, but yeah, this will be maybe for another day or another Fritz trainer or something. By the way, if you haven't gotten Svetlana's Fritz trainers by now, come on, guys. Okay, that was just me for my little interruption of commercial. Now, so the next move is G3 or not?
Well, you would start maybe with c4 just to see what Black is now going to do later. Because if they play like the King's Indian, the Benoni, or whatever else, then maybe you can choose some different systems.
Hmm.
But essentially, it starts on this e6 move. So here you can start either with knight f3 or with g3 already. So it would go like this, and I will come back to this position and we'll look at it the most in depth. But I just wanted to show as to how you can get to it through d5 as well. So d4, d5 is also one of the most classic things that your opponent can do. And here we would probably need to go into the Queen's Gambit territory. And the Catalan works on the Queen's Gambit decline. So if they play e6 here, of course, if they accept it, this is just going to be different types of positions,
Sure.
which if you play d4, c4, you would probably have seen before. And there's also the Slav, which is a bit different from the Catalan. So I don't know if we would really call it the Catalan anymore, but you can for sure still play some G3 systems and get some similar play. So
Hmm.
in the Catalan, usually we develop this knight to f3 first before this knight, because we like to keep this knight flexible, and we want it to not only go to c3, but maybe instead we would consider knight to d2, and sometimes it even comes to a3. So, so we always start with the other knight and then the bishop. And this is our Catalan position that we get from either of the move order.
Yeah. So the oddest or the funniest part about all of this is, of course, what I'm noticing that in the Queen's Gambit you have the c4 pawn, which at one point might be taken by the bishop. But this is
Yeah.
why you even mentioned probably the knight goes to d2 or to a3 to maybe at one point in the game get this pawn back if it gets taken. That's the big question, because if it gets taken, it opens this beautiful diagonal for the bishop, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, you do make a good point about that pawn. So it's a difference between the Catalan and these Queen's Gambit positions because there we would usually develop this bishop on this side of the board and the pawn would just be protected. But here, the bishop is going the completely different direction and the pawn might be hanging at sometimes, which is true. Sometimes we do make it a bit of a gambit. Usually you would gain it back. But there are for sure some lines where you give it up for this initiative and for a nice long diagonal. So that's something that we will look at, and that's one of the features of this Catalan opening. So going back to the knight f6 move order, it's going to transpose to the exact same thing. And you can begin, as I said, either with knight or with the pawn. It's up to you. And now, in order to get to the classic Catalan line, the most popular one is to play d5. Of course, the opponent can deviate and play something like c5, but I guess if they wanted to play this type of structure, they probably would have played it on move 2.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still just go for these Benoni structures, and that's a completely different game.
Okay.
And there's also the Nimzo approach with the b6.
That looks
but
sketchy.
Here, sketchy. Well, we take control of that diagonal first, so I think it should be pretty good for white, and we would come back to something super similar.
Okay.
That we see in the Catalan, anyways. So this is our main position.
Mm-hmm.
I know this might be a bit, it's a bit more like positional than all the other openings that we've taken a look at.
That's fine. That's totally fine. I need to learn that.
So we will later put the bishop on the long diagonal and then put the pressure in the center and potentially on the queen side later too.
Okay.
And now it's an important decision for black to make. So it's a very flexible opening for both colors. So there's a lot of wide choice because it's not as like tactical and straight to the theory as, let's say, the Sicilian. And here you have choices, especially early on, as to which position you want to go for. So it's good to know all of these ideas and all of these positions that arise so that you can later pick that you want a bit more of this type of game or another type, or maybe you want to go straight to the end game and things like that. So black has essentially two choices, whether they want to play the closed centered Catalan or if they want to play the open Catalan. And so the options are either, I guess, play with the bishop or take here on c4. So
what is the open and what is the what was the other
well, this one is the open.
I thought so. Okay. And the other one was called the central Catalan, or what was that?
Well, I would just call it like the closed Catalan, but I don't know if it actually has a real name. But this is just the more open type of it. So I guess we can start with the open because everybody's always concerned about losing a pawn. And this is it's one of those positions where you do sacrifice this pawn for a little bit. So bishop g2 we play. And what do you think are the plans for both sides here?
Yeah, I always like this kind of question. So
I was worried you always hated because I always ask.
Yeah, I'm always hate. Oh God, not that question again. No, I'm really enjoying it because it makes me think on my own. So for you at home, of course, stop the video. Always stop the video. Think for yourself. What do you think are the plans for black? What do you think are the plans for white? This is a little nice exercise, a good training. Afterwards, Svitlana will solve what the main ideas are. So white's plans, I start with white's plans because it is simpler and easier. White has this beautiful diagonal, and this is where we are pushing a lot into. We will try to get the e4 and the d5 square quite busy with either the pawn to e4, the knight to c3, some points in the other direction. The queen can go to c2 as well, and our bishop can go to, I guess, f4 or just d2 to make it a bit more simple. So we're pushing a lot in the direction of the queen side as white after we castle. That's the thing, of course, which is obvious. Our king is safe, so we don't have to worry about this, and we can just like attack and get this pawn back at one point. So black, on the other hand, should try to castle quite quickly, I assume, because there's still a bishop in the way. This is the advantage which white has, of course. Cannot castle to the queen side. I mean, it's possible. I don't think that's a good option. And, well, basically should try to defend and give counterplay on the queen side. And maybe with a hard fight, try to protect the pawn on c4 or give it a good exchange.
That sounds very good.
But it's
So you
all
mentioned
wrong.
no, you mentioned good plans for white. Just one more to add is to maybe play knight to e5 to attack that pawn and to just stand there nicely in the center. And for black, it's right. You can sometimes hold on to the pawn. Sometimes you don't have to. But that's what a lot of the play will revolve around winning back this pawn under favorable circumstances for whichever side you're playing. Of course, you could have, I wanted to mention that you could win it back like this immediately.
Oh, okay.
It's okay to do this. It's not like worse or anything, but it's just a bit like, it's just like an easy equality for the opponent because they get to play a really quick b5 and bishop to b7. And the problem is you cannot really play a4 because b5 is still possible. Not like you cannot play it, but it's just still possible to play b5 because of this tactic on the queen and on the rook. Yeah, it's one of those tactics to just know in the Catalan to not get caught into it. But yeah, essentially, if black is allowed to play b5 and just develop and play c5 really early on without any problems, then, you know, fighting for the opening advantage for white just might be a bit of a stretch. So still going to be equal, but if you want to just be a bit more flexible and a bit more, you know, put a bit more pressure on the opponent, then you can start with your development as opposed to getting back the pawn, which you'll probably get back anyways. So now just a couple to show for black. I'm not sure if we mentioned that black's one of the main plans is actually to go in the center with c5.
C5.
As it often is in these Queen's Gambit positions anyways. But we have been talking about this pawn a lot. So what happens if we actually defend it? Do you have any ideas on how to react to this defense?
That looks very crazy. I guess this is even possible, probably because it's so early in the game, but that has to be, I mean, black has to be super careful. Of course, if the knight moves away from f3, there is the chance to just get this rook on a8.
But black has one defense with this, and it is enough to
that is enough.
hold
Unbelievable.
on. Yeah.
So I would have played e4 and then d5, but it's not working. Wow.
Well, no, it's fine to do this, but then you're not really winning that rook anymore, and then it gives black time to kind of consolidate. So there is a defense here for black and against this tempting knight maneuver. So instead of this, we can go a4.
Oof.
Which, once again, if you are already a Queen's Gambit player, these plans will be quite natural. But if not, it's also fine. For example, I was never a Queen's Gambit player, but I did play the Catalan, so it's not something that has to go together. So we would a4 idea is an important one to know, and this is I'm showing one of those very few lines where this becomes a permanent gambit. So it's not going to be like that usually because, well, b5 is just a slightly strange move. So nobody will play this unless they know that it's like tactically okay, because honestly, to me, it just looks not fine at first glance. But of course, it is still a line, not the most popular, but just important to show because, for example, like me, I'm always scared to give up a pawn, even if there is compensation, it's still scary. So just to show a sample line, for example, we are going to put our knight here. The opponent will defend, as we've said. And what we should do is what Arne mentioned, actually, with e4. We can do that. We can also try to open up the queen side like this with b3. And this looks like a pretty good position with a lot of attacking chances. Of course, still a pawn advantage for black, but if you look at the piece development and just in general the center, you do have initiative for it.
I would prefer white here, of course, since I'm the initiative player.
So that's just one of the examples of what can happen against if black tries to defend it. Of course, there's a lot more to explore, but I do want us to get just the main ideas and then also show one of the model games.
Perfect.
So
yeah.
the theory is something that is possible to do in ChessBase itself if you're really curious about one of those like key lines. And it's impossible to cover the Catalan so quickly, but I'll try to get the main ideas down. So what else is there? Oh yeah, C5. So that's one of the other options in this open Catalan. And personally, it's one of those annoying ones when Black actually tries to take over the initiative, and they don't try to passively defend their own pawn, but instead is going to be a bit of this counterplay. So depending on your opponent, they might want to play a bit more actively like this. And in such cases, you would castle. We've mentioned castling. Black's main line is knight to c6, and here you have a choice as white. You could, if you really want an endgame, if you're an endgame player, you can actually go for this endgame. So you're still down a pawn, but you can do this and win back the pawn at the end because of knight to d2. So now they cannot. Now this diagonal cannot be really defended after b5.
Super
and so
interesting. Okay.
A super common idea of how Black gives up this pawn is to play c3.
Exactly. This is what just spun through my head, and I wanted to ask you, like, is this an option? And now you're confirming it. Yeah.
For
yeah,
sure.
yeah, exactly.
So just to ruin another time a pawn structure, it's the best way to give it up, and but it's still, of course, a good endgame. It could be played for a very long time for both sides. So that's just something. If you right away want to go for an endgame and just to simplify. But of course, there's a more ambitious option, which is queen to a4, which is what's most commonly played. So here I wanted to ask you, what do you think we can do after Black takes one of our other pawns?
My God, it looks so tempting to take on d4, of course, because queen takes, we take the knight. Pawn takes, we take the pawn with check, and the question is, does it work? It looks quite so as if it might work.
It does work. So this is one of these lines that I wanted to show you, is that we can actually take with the knight and win it back here on c6. And the thing is, taking is not good, as you said. The rook just gets lost, and there's no really trick to it. So Black shouldn't do this, but instead they can defend against it.
I thought the knight or the bishop goes between. Yeah, exactly. Funny.
The pieces are equal. And here we have some more tactics. Also important idea to know in the Catalan. Rook to d1. So we keep the bishop there. Instead of exchanging, we keep the bishop there, and after the opponent takes,
now we take the bishop, right?
Exactly.
So funny. Okay.
If funnily enough we get into an endgame with a equal material, is it equal? Well, yeah. We're going to get the c4 pawn.
Yeah,
next
which
turn.
Might even go to c3 once again. Oh no, it doesn't make it that much sense, because then white just gets a knight out and has the connected pawn still. So yeah,
exactly.
We get the
pawn. So we would take it. Yeah. So you will get this endgame. I really like this for white. It's of course it's not like an attacking game anymore, but a lot of the times these endgames that occur from the Catalan, I really enjoy them for white. And here especially, you have a lot of the targets with these weak pawns. So it would be good for somebody who maybe wants to improve their positional skills, or their skills in playing slightly better endgames. This would be a really good line for it. So that's what happens on the immediate c5. Of course, Black doesn't have to do all of this. They don't even have to take this pawn. They could play it more solid and play bishop d7. So maybe this line is one of the most important ones. And after the queen capture, so the point of going with the queen there is that you do take the pawn later. Black also has some tricks. So as I've said, this is one of those lines where Black maybe tries to play for initiative as well. So at this point, we cannot really take this pawn because of knight d4. So the queen would retreat, and we would get this type of middle game. it's rather complex. So it's going to be the play will really start in the middle game with whichever side develops a better initiative, and the game just goes on from here. White could try to attack, could try to play in the center, as can black. Either attack on the queen side, play in the center.
Mhm.
So looks, I still like it for white, but for sure has a counterplay for both of them.
Huh. How funny with this pawn just hanging there on
Mhm.
b5 for now, and black still didn't castle, which is also funny. But
Yeah,
all pieces are
they
out.
will.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Do you have any more questions about the pawn capture?
No, makes absolute sense. Yeah,
Okay,
one last question. No, I had one, but you actually answered it. That's perfect.
okay.
So
No,
we go to the closed
I'm
one.
speed running it a bit because the Catalan is just so complex.
Sure.
But everything should be fine if the opponent takes it. Now that you know the ideas with the knight e5 or knight d2, queen c2, queen a4, you should be able to gain it back eventually.
Mhm.
And if not, then the long diagonal will be weakened. So now we will go more into the closed systems with the bishop e7. And these lines are the most popular, and these lead to very nice positional middle games. So white will bring the bishop to the long diagonal there, and both castle. And which sides do you prefer in these structures? And do you see some advantages and disadvantages to these?
Neither, but so for one, I don't like I'm still not a biggest fan of fianchettos, although I get the hang of it more and more since I'm learning from you and Elisabeth Peetz. On the other hand, I'm so unhappy with the black position too. I had this too a couple of times in long games, but it's just like
So you're just not a fan of closed positions.
Yeah, let's say it like
Yeah?
that. Exactly. The closed positions.
Instead of saying you hate the Catalan, you can just put a diplomatic answer.
Perfect. Yes, I think that's the best answer, and it's true too.
Yeah. So this is going to be a bit closed if neither of the opponents decides to open up the center. I actually really like closed positions because it allows, because it actually, there's less craziness and you can just focus on the plans and, outplay the opponent from there. Of course, some advantages, disadvantages. So the kings are super solid. That's, to me, an advantage. To you, it's a disadvantage. But because you like to attack. So these fianchetto positions with the bishop here usually lead to the king being pretty solid for most of the game. Even against the king's Indian, against, anything else that you can think of, the king just stays pretty safe. This black c8 bishop is a bit passive, and compared to this bishop, which is actually a really good piece. So usually they're around equal and just more positional, as I've said. So the plans for white are to play queen here, rook in the center, and try to play for the central breakthrough with e4. And that's going to be a way to make it a bit more tactical. This bishop can go into either direction, either to fianchetto here or to play in the center with bishop f4. So quite a lot of options, but a pretty consistent plan is with the queen to c2 and rook to d1. And for black, it's important to be patient and to not really open it up too quickly. And the main plan would be to play c5 and to try to have counterplay in the center at the right moment. So that's how these games usually go. Of course, it's very flexible, lots of choice at every single move. There's like 3 different lines, but most of them around similar ideas. So let's say if black plays b6 to try to develop that bishop at least somewhere, in that case we can transpose into a favorable pawn structure like this, which I really like these because our bishop is really good, and this bishop has, like, black already committed to b6, so they either develop here or just leave a really strange spot there on that diagonal. So these are usually, I really like them. We have really good pressure along the C file, so we need to get a rook there really immediately and to try to attack that. And after some C5 ideas, we can have even the hanging pawns structure and sometimes put pressure on these two central pawns from black. So that's kind of what you could do on one of these developing moves. So usually, because black wouldn't really want to transpose into this pawn structure, they would play something like c6. And as I've said, a bit more slow type of game to then play b6, then bishop, then c5. So it could be quite slow. But these positions are still, they become full of life on like, move 20 or like move 15. So it just takes a bit more to boil. So a good idea for white is to know when to do this e4 pawn break. So for example, preparing it with knight d2 is good. I like the knight on d2 instead of on c3, because then there's no question about this pawn getting taken. And essentially, these ones are really common positions in the Catalan. So this type. You can, even sometimes when it looks super passive, but it does become double-edged after a while. So
it looks much better now. I can see potential attacking ideas and also f4 and stuff like that. So yeah, interesting.
For sure. These ones could be a bit more attacking. The example I picked is actually an attacking game, so we'll get to it. To the game itself, it did become attacking. But the Catalan is probably more a choice of, positional players, like maybe Kramnik has played it a lot. I'm sure Magnus has played it too. So it's usually the choice of calmer positional players. And for example, you could get these types of positions, which once again, black is doing fine. White has the center, has the development, and it's all about who is the better middle game player. And middle games are super tough to get good at. They're always different, but the more you get to play your opening and to know your ideas, which we're trying to do today with the Catalan, the better you'll become at middle games, just to have like intuition for which plans are correct. Even if you don't know the theory until move 25, it's not necessary. It's just to know the main ideas is enough, and then having good judgment as to when they're good to do. So these positions are always full of life, and just to play on for the next while and try to trick your opponent somewhere. So one last one I guess I'll show is when black takes here on c4. It's also pretty common. And in this case, we will win back the pawn pretty quickly through this move queen to c2. So remembering this queen to c2 move, that's one of the signature moves of the Catalan. So you're essentially going to play it almost every time. So from here, the queen threatens just to recapture. There's no really tricks here. So normally, if we play knight e5 instead, which is the second most common line, it looks really tempting and it looks, better to go with the knight forward. But here there's there's this really nice line for black, is that they can play knight to c6, and this pawn sacrifice on c6 is actually a good idea for the black side, because then they get the b file and a good middle game chances.
Because of the b file, so they swing over the rook to b8, and that is that is because it looks so messy. Like, what the
and
heck
also
is
helpful
happening?
for this bishop to gain some squares.
So that is really good to know. Interesting.
Yeah, this is a good idea to know for black. It's something to it's super popular, and it's there's a lot of master games on this, so it's not really something that you should like come up with yourself why this pawn sacrifice is good. You have like there's a lot of good examples as to why this pawn sacrifice is played, and this is why this knight e5 move a bit lost its popularity because of that. So instead, queen c2.
I like this idea of, by the way, this move is good. You're just saying it, then you can check the mega database and see there's a lot of good results. Then you can check, okay, this is why it is good. And yeah, or if you ever have a game against the Catalan and something like this might happen, then you can just play this and know, and then you can calculate and go like, okay, why is this actually so good? Ah, this is a good idea. This is also helpful. Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, I use the mega database a lot, or the online
Yes.
online button, and it shows what's the most popular move. Now, that doesn't always mean that you should just go for the popular moves and you can explore other ones, but sometimes if you find a strange line, but you see that some really strong players have played it, so maybe there's only 30 games there, but somehow they're all top grandmasters, so that probably means that there's something to that line that they discovered, or that it's a good one. So it's opening preparation takes a while, and there's just so many resources nowadays that I think it's super hard to pick what to even follow. But at the end of the day, it's just about finding what is right for you, and trying it out. You will not know until you try.
So true.
So just to finish this line quickly and then get to the example, Black normally plays here a6. So the idea is to tempt the queen to take it and get attacked by b5. So instead, we can play a prophylactic move. What do you think we can do?
a4.
Exactly. So we've already learned this main idea with a4. So at that point, we will be able to take. So the bishop can go here, queen c4, the bishop to c6, for example, to challenge our light squared bishop.
I thought about b5, but yeah.
And it goes on. So, for example, bishop f4, and you play on the middle game. So these were some of the main ideas of the Catalan. Of course, it's a very complex opening that deserves a lot of exploring.
Absolutely.
But overall, that's where the pieces go. So some of the main plans and what happens if the opponent takes.
You kind of give us, or the viewers who haven't played the Catalan, a menu, and you see like, this is how it tastes like. And some might go like, oh, this looks really delicious. And others might go like, no, that's not my kind of food. So you give a little sneak peek of how the plans are working, what the ideas are. And some people might go like, oh, this is exactly what I was looking for. I'm a player who likes those openings.
Yeah. And even sometimes you might not even know that you're a positional player. You know what I mean?
True,
It actually happened to me because I've always liked... I like exciting chess with a lot of tactics and a lot of calculations. And then at some point, like when I would get like feedback from like either coaches or just like other strong players, is they would just like all had the opinion that, oh, like you're a positional player, right? And it was such a surprise to me that when I actually did switch to a more, positional and like calm repertoire, I had way better results than in tactics, just because it's like, to me, it's not... some people are really naturally like good at it and they like complications, but you might not even know that your main strength is actually like these calmer positions or even endgames.
Such a great point and good point, because I mean, according to Carsten Müller, who made the 4-player type model, which is more and more common to talk about, he says the most people are the activists. And truth is, after all, I'm an activist or a hyperactivist too. Truth is that I'm one of those, let's say, I wouldn't even say it, gifted chess players who love to attack and can see some patterns, but hasn't learned the vocabulary, which is the positional play, and was a bit too lazy to go into the detail about the chess stuff, which is important. And the players who take this step and learn a bit about the positional stuff and all of this, they often enough have an advantage to the activist player, which is quite interesting. Yeah. I noticed that.
I like that model too.
So you have a model game talking about models, right?
I do have the model game, and it's from Alexander Alekhine.
Huh, heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, quite a famous guy. So it was it's a long time ago. It's from 1942. So this opening has been around for a while, and it's I think the game itself is famous. At least I thought I've seen it before when I saw it, but Just never thought that it was actually in the Catalan, so I wanted to show it.
Okay.
So it begins with d4, and then c4, and he started here with g3.
Okay. Straight to the point.
Straight to the point. So here, the variations that we were exploring were with knight to f3, which is just another way to do it. But he went for this bishop g2.
Yeah.
So maybe that was the main trend in his day, maybe just his own preference. But a lot of the time you can have these different move orders, and it's going to be really similar transposition. So his opponent took here on c4. He went for the immediate pawn recapture with the queen, and the opponent played bishop to c6, an idea that we did see just recently. Do you think we should trade bishops here?
I think not. We get the knight out and we castle.
Exactly. So this Catalan bishop is one of the main is one of the main players in our middle game.
That's
so we
why
do
Black
want
tries to get rid of it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so we do want to keep it, whereas this bishop is just looking a bit strange on its unnatural square. So instead, Black tries to gain some time by attacking the queen and going in the center. So that's one of the ways to go about it for Black. But we're just gonna watch how Alekhine dealt with it.
Go ahead. Yes.
Until it gets to the more tactical part. So far it's simply development, and the piece placements I hope are pretty much self-explanatory. There's of course a lot of options, so if you do find a different move, it's probably still good and it's worth exploring. But most of these pieces go exactly where we have planned for them to go. So now, after this recapture, Alekhine decided that it was a good idea to activate the knights, and although it does come at the exchange of these bishops, yeah, the central pressure that White has right now is a lot better than Black, because Black is still not castled, which will become important. Normally, that's how trouble starts, is that somebody just delayed castling a little bit, and then that determines the whole game. So he goes queen to f3, attacking the pawn. So Black tries to defend it. Of course, Black is trying to castle short and not really long, so that we don't really see that too often. Now White played a really nice move. They played bishop to e3.
Yeah,
so
I thought about that, yeah.
Sacrificing the pawn, but actually, we should look at this. What happens after Black takes?
I guess knight b5 comes to mind, looks very natural.
Which knight, though?
The c knight. c3 to b5. But...
Good, you picked the right knight.
Okay, good.
You picked the right one.
Good, no buts.
No buts. So, knight here. Actually, this ends up winning the queen.
Yeah, and it looks like a bit.
The idea is that, of course, knight to c7 is the main threat, but there's a secondary threat. It's that rook here and the queen is trapped. So,
just like
there is no defense. No matter what they do,
brutal.
Rook here, and the queen gets trapped. So it's a nice trick to know as well. We often know that this pawn is a bit poisonous, so his opponent didn't take it and played castling, which looks fairly normal. So now, of course, we do see that there's this battery of the queen and the bishop attacking it. Where should the knight move to make the best discovered attack?
Well, it looks very tempting to go to f5 because, of course, it attacks the bishop, so the queen has to defend this bishop, and there's only... Yeah, I mean, going back to d8 is probably the best option.
You guessed it right. So knight to f5, really tempting to go here, and queen d8 is a bit of a passive way to do it, but it was the best, which Alekhine's opponent didn't see or didn't choose. His opponent was a strong Serbian player, didn't mention, but his last name was Rabar, and his first name was Barslav. So I didn't know about this player before, but how many players do I know from 1940s? So. Queen to d8 would have been passive, so I do understand why he wouldn't want to go for it. But bishop to c5 was what he played. That was the other way to defend
Oh, I
it.
didn't even think about that. Yeah.
So here there is actually some tactics that do start. Here, the next move I think is asking to be played, but what should white do? When you see the queen and the bishop like this,
Yeah.
there's...
Well, it is, of course, very tempting to go to a4 with the knight, I think.
That's how it starts.
Yeah.
Knight to a4. So it's usually a good idea to exchange a knight for a bishop like that if there's an option is in this open middle game. And now is the main question.
Well, the question for me is, does it work to play b4 now?
Mm-hmm.
Queen takes, rook, then the queen goes back. Doesn't look like it. We always can escape with our knight to e7, giving a check. So we just have to find...
I would be a bit concerned.
There is also knight to h6 check.
True. Now you're starting to look at the attacking possibilities.
So many options.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if we... that doesn't work yet. But...
You were on a good track.
Yeah. So what happens if we go to h6 with our knight giving a check? The king has to go to... No, well, it doesn't have to.
Yeah, it will probably go to h8. Yeah, so knight h6 is a really interesting move, but it's a bit hard to see what happens like after this.
I'm thinking of bishop d4, or d4 looks the best for me.
Yeah, this is a really good idea, and actually if you just modify this a little bit, it will gain even more effect. So instead of knight to h6, if you take that same idea but modify it.
You play you modify it with knight e7 check, or
no, not with knight e7, but even more aggressive. I thought you would go straight for the...
Oh, of course. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, what the heck? Knight takes on g7, of course. Very obvious, actually.
Yeah, so it's happen. I mean, it's like maybe the move itself is is easy to see, but it's the more difficult part is to see what happens after it. But yes, so you actually mentioned before, which was interesting, the computer does like b4 move, but in the combination with the knight sacrifice. So if you do play b4 right away, the computer likes that inclusion, either with the rook or just with the sacrifices. So it's still one of the top moves for that reason. But this one, still, like, I'm sure that it's still good. The position is still nice for white, but it's just more difficult to find what happens after. So knight g7 is, to me, the most clear one and the best attacking way to continue. So the important move to notice was this bishop to d4 to create that pin, which to me looks deadly, and I would just think that it's over for black already. There's still a bit to see, but it's I think you're gonna find it.
I mean,
so
I'm not even absolutely sure what white can do after knight d7, knight c to d7, right?
That's a good point. So that's what I wanted to ask you. So there's only one winning move here. This in the game, black defended differently, but this one would have been also nice.
Now we go to c3 with the bishop, right, to open the
exactly. I thought it was pretty difficult to spot because it's a move backwards, but for sure, bishop to c3. Once you see it, it fully clicks.
Yeah.
So not only we attack this, but we also attack this knight, and we also prevent the queen from going to d5 and making like an exchange.
Brutal.
Everything. So no matter what they do, let's say, I don't know, they come back with the queen somewhere, we're still going to take that.
Yeah.
And the queen and the bishop together are just too strong. So bishop c3 is the only winning move, but it is enough, and it does win pretty much on the spot. So Alekhine's opponent played knight here, which has a pretty simple response. which is not even that big of a tactic.
But we can just take, right? Or
Exactly.
am I
He
wrong?
just takes, and well, the opponent just wanted to go to the end
I
game
see, I see.
instead because he couldn't find a way to really survive that attack. How do you think are the chances in the end game?
White should win this. I mean, White will quickly probably exchange the... Well, do you even have to exchange the bishop is the question with the knight. Well, I'm looking like bishop c3 and then rook to d6 or something. It's rough to defend the knight even for black, I think.
Yeah, it is a really rough endgame for black. I would just say completely lost unless, I don't know, unless white does something super strange and like lets in the rooks on the second rank. Unless that happens, it should be pretty straightforward. Alekhine won pretty quickly after that. He invaded with the rooks, and although he did allow the opponent there too, but not the second rook. That's the important part.
Yeah.
2 rooks would be too much. So he did make this exchange of the bishop for
better.
For the knight, and the opponent actually just resigned, probably because the second rook is going to come in here and just take. They're going to take everything, and black really doesn't have enough counterplay to withstand it.
True.
So that was the end of the game. The opponent resigned, and it showed a bit of a more attacking side of the Catalan middle games, which can sometimes happen, as we saw this knight g7 sacrifice. But of course, there's a lot more to this opening, and there's a lot of good courses on that opening, and it's a good idea to take a look at it, especially if you want to become better at middle game play.
And with d4 and fianchetto playing too. That is also something, which I'm just like refuse to learn.
And it's a setup that works against a lot of other replies. So you could play this fianchetto against everything. Particularly annoying against, I would say, King's Indian players, because then they don't get that big of an attack on the king side, which is what they all want.
That's funny. True. Yes, that is annoying.
Not really a Catalan anymore, but still. Just g3 against everything.
A little setup kind of like, which is similar to a lot of Catalan openings or d4 openings then. Yeah, I actually, funnily enough, I didn't 100% know what the Catalan is. I've heard about it many times. As you mentioned already, Magnus Carlsen. I'm very sure I heard him say, I'm playing the Catalan today, or something like that. And I think he's done it often enough. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was it. Svitlana Smart Moves takes a small break. We will be back in summer. I'm pretty sure about this, so don't worry.
In May? What do you mean summer?
In May, so already in May. Okay, I just wanted to give you even more.
Maybe even April. My exams end in April, so it's not that huge of a break.
Fingers crossed for that. So, thanks a lot and see you soon. Bye-bye.